Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson by Tutors, and in today's video I'm going to be covering one type of government intervention, and that's going to be subsidies. So before we begin, actually I just want to quickly explain a subsidy is like a payment given to producers in a market, so it affects the supply side directly, that help them be able to produce more, but while still receiving like the same high price, because as you know, when supply increases, equilibrium price will decrease. So why are subsidies even considered? To begin with, to control the rate of inflation and boost the real living standards of some groups of consumers. Like I mentioned before, when supplies increase, that means the equilibrium price goes down. Consumers pay that equilibrium price, but producers receive the same original price that was higher because of the subsidy. It also encourages the provision and consumption of merit goods. So a merit good is something with a positive externality or some social benefits that are experienced and enjoyed by the people not directly consuming the product. As in, for example, something like if they were going to subsidize schools, for example, like for some reason if schools weren't publicly funded already, you could subsidize schools because obviously there are positive externalities in education. And especially because in a free market, merit goods are usually underconsumed or underproduced, which of course leads to a loss of social welfare. It also maintains or increases the revenues of producers during difficult times. So, like, think about now in the world, the pandemic. Now might be a good time for governments to start subsidizing some producers that produce. There's some struggling producers that may produce some very important goods still, to help them be able to cover their costs. It also reduces the cost of capital investment projects. So, in the long run, it helps producers be able to invest in better capital for more production in the future, which affects long run aggregate supply, which is a macroeconomics concept that I will not get into in this video. Subsidies also slow down the process of long term structural change and decline in the industry. For example, industries like farming, coal, fishing, and steel eventually are going to run out because obviously we're going to run out of those natural resources, or something better is going to come along. So subsidies just help those producers in that area pretty much just continue to produce while minimizing their losses. It also boosts unemployment for certain groups of workers working in the industry. So, if, for example, we subsidize coal miners, then supply of coal should theoretically go up, and that means they need more people. They need to hire more people to help mine the coal, and yeah, they can afford to hire more people because they're still receiving that high price from the subsidy. So those are some of the main benefits to subsidies and why they're even considered in the first place. So to model a subsidy, we can see here a subsidy always shifts the supply curve to the right, as in it increases. And we can see here with inelastic demand, the original equilibrium price starts at P1 and equilibrium quantity starts at Q1. When we increase the supply, the price drops to P2 and the quantity goes up to Q2. As you can see here, it's not really a super big increase in quantity compared to the price because the demand is inelastic. And here we can see that producers are actually receiving the price 2 plus sub level of pricing. This minus P2 obviously is the amount of the subsidy that suppliers, are receiving. So they can produce more while still getting that high price, but consumers are better off because they get a lower price. With elastic demand, same sort of concept, starts at P1, Q1, supply increases to Q2, so quite a big jump in price of in the quantity, I mean, and a smaller decrease in price, but still nonetheless better for the consumers. This is especially desirable for a merit good, like I mentioned earlier, goods with positive externalities in consumption. So maybe schooling, something like that. This is what is usually desirable. Producers just want to produce more of this good because they can now afford to, and it benefits society, which is why the government justifies giving them subsidies. However, there are quite a few disadvantages to a subsidy as well. So the first one is distortion of the market. So as we can see before, subsidies definitely distort the market, as in they change the equilibrium price and quantity of a free market. Because government intervention, it's obviously not the market is not left to its own mechanisms, and sometimes it's argued that it can lead to misallocation of resources, which are further some of the further disadvantages. It's also mentioned here export subsidies distort the free trade in goods and services and can severely curtail the ability of LDCs or less developed countries to compete in the markets of industrialized countries. So, if a developed country like the US subsidize their exports, it definitely makes it hard for some there are less developed countries like Zambia or something to compete with their exports. Arbitrary assistance is the next disadvantage. So, well, if one group is getting subsidized, why not subsidize something else? There's definitely more than one merit good, and in the market. So that kind of decision is also one of the arguments that go against the subsidy. Financial costs. So obviously, someone has to pay for the subsidy. So who's actually going to do that? Obviously, the government. Where does the government's funding come from? That's from taxpayers. So the final cost of subsidy ultimately falls on consumers or taxpayers, who they themselves may have not derived any benefit from the subsidy. So if you're subsidizing, for example, I don't know, like the fishing industry, for example, but like let's say the person just never eats fish because they're allergic to it or something. They're not directly benefiting from the subsidy because obviously they don't enjoy the lower prices of the fish on the market anymore. So that's usually an argument against it because every taxpayer is contributing to it, whether it helps them or not. It also encourages inefficiency. So, like I mentioned earlier, in the benefits, actually, it was to protect like firms that are slowly changing structurally and becoming more obsolete. But that's also encouraging inefficiency because it artificially protects inefficient firms who definitely need to restructure. So, like if like coal mining are still using something like I actually don't know if they still use it, but if they're still using something like mine carts that are like gas powered or something, and they should switch to something else. Yeah, either way, the point is those companies without a subsidy would be incentivized to restructure if they want to stay in business, but a subsidy just encourages them to continue with the way things are because they're still getting the high price. Risk of fraud. Another thing, this is less important in my opinion, but it's still something to consider. There's definitely a risk of fraud when allocating subsidy payments to producers. And finally, there are also alternatives. So, if depending on the goal of the government, so maybe they want to help lower income families, they can just directly support their income instead through like the tax and benefit system, as opposed to subsidizing the, let's say, some an essential good that most people buy. There's just always an alternative, and it's important to remember the opportunity cost, which is an important concept in economics. The opportunity cost of implementing a subsidy could have been to, for example, help people directly with direct income support. So overall, I hope that was helpful to you guys. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and we will try to get back to them. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more educational videos coming your way soon.